We've got to always be clear about that when we're talking about the working class, it's not a homogenous group. Never has been. If you go back, say, 100 years ago, you had your skilled workers and your unskilled workers. You had people who lived in slums, people who lived in early forms of social housing, people who owned their own homes. You had the Glaswegian workers, you had your London workers, you had your rural workers, and you had your urban workers. And today, again, it's not one homogenous mass. And we've got to be clear, there are divisions which those at the top will try and exploit. And this government has done that, frankly, in the most cynical way possible. In fact, since they come to power, they tried to turn the working poor against the unemployed over benefits. They tried to turn the able-bodied against the disabled again over benefits. And they tried to turn private sector workers against public sector workers over pensions. We've got to be united and fight to be united and fight those divisions. And we've got to be clear about our arguments in order to do so. It's only the Labour movement, the biggest democratic movement in this country, representing 6.5 million workers, that is in a position to do that. Norm, I'm so glad you talked about the history of new unionism. It's so important. We need to know our traditions. We need to know how people fought in the past. And in terms of a new unionism today, it's complicated what we've got to do because of this new service sector working class often works very insecure. People often will do 3 or 4 jobs in the same year. We've got lots of part-time workers who can't get a full-time job. Lots of temporary workers who don't have the same rights and terms and conditions as other workers. So as well as organising in the workplace, we've got to do that. We need community trade unionism too, organising in the community. Now Unite, the biggest union, my union, have started to do that with the community membership. And I think that's a start. It doesn't go anywhere near enough, but it is a start. We need to organise the unemployed as well. The official unemployment rate in this country is 2.7 million. Forget that figure, it's a lot higher. If you include other people who are economically inactive but not included in that figure, as well as I say, part-time workers who can't get full-time work, you're looking at over 6 million people who can't get a full-time job in this country. We need to be looking at how we organise that. Now, and just quickly, in terms of the whole self-defined as left thing, I won't get too bogged down in that myself, to be honest with you. Lots of people just say they're in the middle or the centre, because lots of people like to think they're moderate, their politics are common sense. You know, we've got to win people over issue by issue. Most people, for example, 75% of people want to renationalise the railways. Most people want the housing crisis sorted out. Most people object to the privatisation of our services. Take the most popular, one of the most popular policies of the last government was the 50p tax on those in the top 1% of the population. We win people over issue by issue. And finally, again, it is so important, people have pointed this out, new groups of people, pissed off people if you like, who are getting engaged and struggle for the first time. I was on those student protests, and I'm sure many of you in this room were on those protests as well. And what actually struck me, some of the most radical, determined activists were the EMA kids, working class kids, often from estates across London, who were politicised for the first time, who felt a government of millionaires was slamming the door in the faces of people like them. And I was struck, and I talked to a lot of schools across London, I'm always struck by how politically savvy and knowledgeable these young working class kids are. And they're being radicalised by this government, but we've got to find a way of organising that. And what was so inspiring about those student protests is they gave courage to other people. It was said before those student protests, the English, the British, they're not like the hot-headed Greeks and the French, they won't fight back. But the students and those young working class kids showed it was possible, and that gave trade unionists, for example, the courage to fight back. It was one of the reasons March for the Alternative was as big as it was. It gave people who went out on strike last June and last November that strength. So we do have to be a broad coalition. We've got to reach out as best we can. We have to communicate and learn often, and the left is often very bad at this, to communicate in a way in which people understand, to relate it to people's experiences. That is what we can do, but I am confident because we have a government which has no mandate for what it's doing. It only got 36% of the vote, despite having it handed to them on a plate. Biggest economic crisis since the 30s, woefully unpopular Labour government at the time, and they are pushing a most radical right-wing agenda since World War II. Things like the NHS privatisation, they never even bothered putting that to the electorate. It is weaker than it looks. And if we are united and determined and we build a coherent alternative, we try and fight those divisions which this government is trying to exploit, then we can fight and we can win. Thank you.
I did have one last slide for you, but I won't bother. I'll try and explain it instead. I mean, I just want to reinforce what Owen said, really. And I think what we've got coming up in the next few weeks is another strike over the pensions. Now, there's going to be less workers on strike. However, that doesn't automatically mean that it's over, that it's not going to be as problematic for the government. In many ways, it could be more problematic for the government. And that is based on one condition, that what we do is we mobilise every single group that is affected by austerity to get onto the demonstrations that are organised in defence of pensions. Because pensions dispute is about austerity. You know, the wage cuts that we're effectively having in the public sector because we haven't had a pay rise for God knows how long, that's about austerity. You know, the attacks on the disabled is about austerity. You know, austerity is a big political idea which we need to use to mobilise people in solidarity on those demonstrations from various constituencies that are under attack. And what that means is, it's solidarity. It's actually the act of solidarity. It means, and that means that the trade unionists that receive the solidarity of the other groups of people that are under attack are then more likely to give back that solidarity to those people who are under attack. There was a bit of a discussion this morning about, you know, and it's been going on for a while, about, you know, how do we get, you know, come up with alternatives, and we need alternatives and so on and so forth. You know, I agree with that, but the important thing I think to remember is the ideology of solidarity really can only really be built by the practical acts of solidarity. You know, by actually getting people on the streets and giving solidarity. That's how you create a community of resistance which is based on solidarity. So that, you know, that's how I'm going to end it. It's getting on the streets, getting people to deliver solidarity, and that's the way that we can build a movement that can get rid of these bastards.
Thank you to Pat, Owen and Adrian, and special thanks to all of you who made contributions. It really makes the meeting.